Another Fiscal Fridays with Fred. You might have heard that Idaho's two U.S. senators, Senator Crapo and Senator Risch, visited the state capitol this past week. And they came to talk about how Idaho is much more functional than Washington, D.C. They did talk a little about Russia and some other things, but on fiscal matters, they contrasted Idaho with D.C. Now, D.C. is a very low bar. We're now at 30 trillion with the T in debt. And of course, every year they have these budget crises. They try to raise the debt ceiling. And these two senators extolled Idaho's fiscal prudence. And of course, they praised the legislature, of which they were a part of at one time many years ago. And that comes on the heels of another video that was done by a teacher in the public school system. And this teacher was comparing Idaho's balanced budget to, of course, the federal budget, which is imbalanced. And then this video that the teacher did was put on the governor's website, again, extolling Idaho's fiscal prudence. Well, the story is not quite that simple. The last time the federal budget was balanced was in 2001, quite a while ago, the end of the Clinton era. And it was balanced in part because there was a lot of economic growth and excess Social Security dollars were used to offset some other deficits that were occurring. And so, on a net basis, the government said, yes, we're running a surplus. But let's not get into that too much. Let's just accept that there was a surplus. Well, this is what's interesting. I actually have in front of me a piece of paper that has what Idaho received from the federal government in fiscal 2001, about 20 years ago, 21 years ago. And we got about $1 billion of federal funds. And that was about a third, well, actually less than that, 29.6% to be precise, of everything that Idaho spent. They think, well, why does that matter? Well, federal funds are used in Idaho to fund a variety of programs. The biggest one, of course, is Medicaid. And of course, federal money is used for roads. It's also used in the education system. So back in 2001, when the federal budget was balanced, 29.6% of the funds came from the federal government to Idaho. Let's fast forward to 2021. I'm using this year because this is the last year we have the actual expenditures. And for that year, the budget overall had grown from 3.6 billion to about 10.3 billion, 10,229. So not quite triple, but a lot bigger. But very importantly, the federal government now contributed not 29.6, but 46% of Idaho's expenditures. Again, from about 29.6, call that 30, to 46%. What does that mean? Well, now what's happening is very simple. The federal government is borrowing trillions, and that money goes everywhere, including to states. It goes to individuals for programs. So basically, Idaho is balancing its budget on the back of borrowed federal money. I'll say that again. Idaho's budget is only balanced because we're taking billions of dollars of federal money that's borrowed. Now, that's a bold assertion. Could I back it up? Absolutely. Because the federal government doesn't have a balanced budget and it's grown programs like Medicaid, Medicaid expansion. So, to the extent Idaho has participated in programs that have grown with borrowed money, it's using borrowed money to pay for these programs. How much extra money do we get? So, again, in 2001, about 30% of what Idaho spent was federal money, and now that's 46. The difference between 30 and 46 is about $1.6 billion. Wow. So that means if the federal government balanced its budget and in doing so had to reduce its outlays and in doing so gave Idaho less, we'd have less money from the federal government for what types of programs? Well, it might shock you or it might not, but in 2021, we spent $3.3 billion on Medicaid. That's not all health and human services, just Medicaid. Of that, 2.3 billion came from the feds. So if you think about getting 1.6 billion less from the feds, where would that come from? It'd have to come from Idaho taxpayers. Another area, public school support. We got $432 million from the feds. Well, if we got less of that from the feds, where would it come from? The Idaho taxpayer. Another area, the Idaho Transportation Department, 324 million from the feds. Well, if we got less money from the feds, where would that come from? Maybe higher fuel taxes. The point is, Idaho has a balanced budget only because it is dipping its hands into the federal bucket, which is funded massively with borrowed money. And if the federal government said, you know, we are going to balance our budget, and by doing so, we're going to tighten the belt, we're going to send states less money, Idaho would be out of balance immediately. Now we'd scramble. And for example, Medicaid would have to be cut back because there's no way we could come up with the lion's share of the $2.3 billion that the federal government provides. Just to put that in perspective, the federal government, by providing, and I'll give you the exact number, $2,364,853,000 in Medicaid. That's what the federal government provides in Medicaid. The entire general fund spend for everything is $3.7 billion. $2.3 billion is provided, as I just said, from the federal government just for Medicaid. Yet every general fund item in the budget, and I'm talking about education, health and human services, judicial, Idaho State Police, parks, fish and game, all that other general fund money, although fish and game isn't general fund, but all the other agencies that are, the Attorney General, the governor's office, the legislative branch, the Department of Revenue and Taxation, all those in total are not much more. I mean, there's certainly more than we get from the federal government just in Medicaid dollars. And if you add federal funds for public schools and Medicaid and just other welfare, that's actually about what the state spends. So the programs that Idaho has that are federally funded are not sustainable unless the federal government borrows trillions and throws it our way. Thank you for joining me in another fiscal